So we're going to do heart rate variability tonight. What this is the quintessential new thing that everybody's measuring to see how healthy you are. Heart rate variability will literally indicate how healthy your nerve system is. So within all the testing that you can do, this one test is a primary test of how healthy you are as a body. Heart rate variability is very, very punctual on showing you, is your stress coming in due to emotional, physical, chemical, neurological? What exactly is going on? I have two ways to do this test in the office. I have the stress response evaluation, which is the test that everybody took when they first came in, where it said now, 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 now. I also have another one, and it's called the alpha. And what it is a test that actually uses two conductive pads on your wrists, and it will actually measure the electromagnetic field produced by your heart.
You call that what?
The alpha test.
Oh.
Now these tests will show you how well your heart is working. So the key in heart rate variability is to have a graph that looks similar to this. So there are three components to heart rate variability. There is very low, low, and high. Now this is talking about the actual heart rate itself. So there's a very low heart rate, a low heart rate, and a high heart rate. So when we look at that, and we're looking at the graph, this is what we want to see. So very low, low, and high. Now each one of these aspects of heart rate variability is related to an aspect of the nerve system. So when we look at this, very low is right here, high is right here, and then low is right here. So we really don't need to know the terms, but we need to understand what this means. So when we're looking at this, I'll even color code it a little different. So let's make this very low, this green, whatever that is, low, and then we'll make high this purple color. So we can see it looks different. Now, very low means that your heart is driven only by what's called sympathetic nerve or parasympathetic nerve system. So that means you're only driven by the system that is the base system to make everything heal. But here's the funny part. In heart rate, this isn't good, because it means you've literally burnt out your ability to communicate to your heart and it won't fluctuate correctly. I'll get into that one a little more. Low, on the other hand, is a culmination. So this one on this side right here, this is parasympathetic driven. This one is sympathetic. So this side right here is stress driven. This is parasympathetic. So this is the base frequency that drives everything. I'm going to put a little niche in everything I teach you guys, because this gets into the heart and it's a little different in the heart than everywhere else in the body. So what happens here is, what's supposed to happen is, when you breathe in, your heart rate is supposed to speed up, and when you breathe out, your heart rate is supposed to slow down. The ability to do that is here. Right here in the low frequency of the heart rate is the ability for your nerve system to speed up and slow down your heart at will. This is the indication of how healthy you are. What we're supposed to see is roughly, of all your heartbeats in, say, a minute time frame, we're supposed to see maybe 1 to 2 driven by your parasympathetic, 1 to 2 driven by your sympathetic, and 98 to 99% driven by just the nerve system fluctuating. So this is the heart rate ability to speed up and slow down. What happens is, when we do the test, if your heart rate is really, really high all the time, it means you're in a sympathetic stress, neurologically based. So it's going to cause your heart to beat fast. But if you drive this long enough, this sympathetic stress, you'll actually burn out the communication pathway. This is called an exhausted nerve system. And what that will lead to is your parasympathetic driving your heart. The cardinal sign if somebody's going to die or have a heart attack is their heart beats at the same rate. That means it's parasympathetically driven. That means you have driven your body so hard that the nerves won't communicate correctly anymore. This is where heart attacks happen. When this frequency here is very high, it means you can't fluctuate your heart. You can't turn on relaxation and turn on stress at any time. It's just running at the base level. So you're not communicating correctly anymore. And when it's not communicating correctly, you literally burn your heart muscle out. Because what's causing the heart to keep beating at that rate, speeding up or slowing down, if it does at all, is just the part of your system that's supposed to only make you heal. So what you're doing is burning out that part of your system now. So how this works is when you're stressed out, you burn out this part first. So what we'll see first is this comes up high, this goes down low, then this will start coming up high, and this comes down low, which means your body is literally being driven, your heart is literally being driven by hormones. It's not being driven by neurological functions anymore. Which means that you're literally making it contract just by basic hormone functions. So this is a fail-safe, and we'll burn that out. That's when we have a heart attack. So what we want to see in heart rate variability is we want to see this very low, this high, and this very low. When we see that, it tells me that you can fluctuate. This right here is adaptability. So if you have it really high in the middle, it means you're 100% adaptable. The more this comes down, and this goes up, or this goes up, your life decreases. The length of time you will live decreases. This is a direct reflection of how adaptable you are to any disease or dysfunction. So when we read journals, let's say if you have a high heart rate variability, and I read this one about 6 months ago, it said if you have a high heart rate variability, which means that it's low here, high here, and low here, you can have stage 4 cancer and live 30 years. But if you have a low heart rate variability, which means these are high and this is low, it means your nerve system doesn't control your heart anymore, you're just barely getting by, you can have stage 1 cancer and die in 6 weeks.
Whoa.
So this test literally tells me how healthy you are as a human. This test tells me, are we adapting correctly? This is the one that when I see patients, I go, you're going towards a heart attack. This is making you sick. When we change that and we make it adaptable, then I go, I know you're going to have some extra years, 10 or 20 extra years of your life now, because now you can adapt to stress correctly, because now your brain is telling your heart what to do, and it's not running on hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. So this is a very, very indicative of how healthy you are. This test by itself indicates how long you will live in generality. So it'll literally say, if this is high here, and this is high here and low here, I know you're going to go towards some sort of event. It may be a cardiac event or some sort of neurological breakdown. Because it's an indication of how well your heart is being controlled by your nerve system. And because your heart is the driver in your body that drives the blood flow and the nutrients throughout your body, if this isn't working right, it's going to tell me systems are starting to shut down and we're going to get really sick. You guys have any questions on this? So heart rate variability by itself is really cool because this is the interesting thing. We can actually train this. We can actually train you if we have problems here to do heart rate variability correctly. And in doing that, it trains your brain to control your heart correctly, which means it will start linking to all the other systems correctly. Because the only way you can speed up and slow down your heart is if you're speeding up all of your stress and slowing down all of your stress, because this is a prime generator. So a lot of people believe the heart runs everything. And the heart can talk to the brain, and the brain can talk to the heart, and they do work in different manners. But what happens is if they're not linked correctly and they become disconnected, that's when you start getting out of sync, and that's when problems happen. So our goal is to have them linked so that this nerve system can speed it up and slow it down, and it doesn't have to run everything. Yes, sir.
So, when they talk about type, 1, 2, or 3 phase in cancer and all, that's not the real information that you want to know. You want to know how your body responds to stress and cancer, to what the outcome's going to be over
Well,
here.
we know if you have cancer, you have an exhausted nerve system. We know that if you have diabetes, you have an exhausted nerve system.
So it's already
at that place. But we know that if your body isn't working correctly and we can reconnect it and it works correctly, then your body can heal itself. Now, I'm not legally allowed to say that I heal cancer, but I'm legally allowed to say that you do. So the deal for me is to say that I'm not curing anything, I'm connecting your body, and then you guys do the miracles.
Okay.
So what happens is I'm allowing the innate intelligence within your body to go in, communicate in a state of relaxation, and then heal everything. Because every 9 months you remake your body.
And only the body heals itself.
Exactly. So if we put a drug in, that's going to disconnect us.
Yeah.
Speed it up or slow it down. We cut things out, that's going to disconnect us. Because now every other organ system has to compensate for that system not working correctly. Our job is to reconnect it. Reconnect it, have the best potential that we have, and regrow. And then when we do that, we heal ourselves. And we're able to do that. The problem is that you have two paradigms of health. One states that you're a machine, you're going to break down, and you're stupid. That is the Western medicine viewpoint of the body. The other one, you could say is Eastern, but it's just it's holistic and vitalistic. And what that means is the body is self-healing and self-regulating, and it needs everything together to work correctly. There's no accidental parts in our body. There's no extra pieces. So I'll give you an example of this. We used to think that the appendix was a vestigial organ. That means an organ that didn't do anything. I've even heard theories that it was used because when we were cavemen, we would eat rocks. Now that's just ludicrous in my mind, because why would we eat rocks? That just doesn't make any sense. But what we found out is that if you take the appendix out, the appendix is a white blood cell producing organ. It's a lymphatic organ, and it shoots white blood cells out to destroy all the stuff that can cause colon cancer. You take the appendix out, and now the incidence of colon cancer goes up to like 60 to 80%. Because now you don't have the ability to destroy the carcinogenic substances in your bowel. So everything in your body is there for a reason. It's not by accident. My goal is to make them all communicate correctly at 100%. So if we think of this, the easy way to understand this is, say we're driving a car and the spark plugs aren't firing correctly. And we're going goom, 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 because one's working, the other one isn't, and the timing just isn't on. Does that make sense to you guys? My job is to time the spark plugs, and now instead of being able to go 20 miles an hour, you can go 140. And you can use everything correctly and use it at the right manner. The job is to make it communicate, and then it heals. That's the job of the chiropractor in neurological based chiropractic. Everything else that you'll see chiropractors talk about is driven on the neurology. I used to be a structural guy. I used to say, look at this curve, look at these x-rays. The truth is that is the symptom of the neurology. Your neurology determines your health, vitality, your sickness, your disease. Every single problem you have is a direct reflection of your neurology. This heart rate variability that I was talking about, direct reflection of how well you can control your body. That is the ultimate goal, is to connect you and allow you to communicate correctly. And then you guys do the miracles. And why I love coming into practice is I literally get to watch you guys come in and go, hey doc, guess what I did? And the list goes forever. I can do this, I can do that, I can do, and that's what we like to see, and that's why I like coming into practice, because I literally start hearing about all these success stories about what they're able to do now. Play with the grandkids, go climb a 14er, run this, do, all these things happen all the time because all we're doing is tapping into the intelligence of the body and releasing it. What turns that intelligence off or decreases, I won't even say turn off, decreases, is the stress response. Because when you're in the stress response, the body cannot heal. Now, it'll do everything correctly. The intelligence will be used correctly. It'll always be producing itself correctly, but if you build up so many toxins, then it will push all the toxins into one area, and then you might get cancer there. But it's allocating those things so you don't get hurt and die. So an example of this is, have you guys ever heard of gout? Why would the body push all these uric acid, all this stuff that's really toxic to us, as far away from the brain into the big toe, so it can't hurt the brain? Because this is the driver. So the body's smart enough to know, because if you think about it, well, if it's systemic and this uric acid is everywhere, why doesn't it go to the brain and the elbow and the liver and everywhere else? It starts in the big toe because the body knows if it sequesters it down there, it's as far away from the most important part of the body. That's that intelligence. So that's what we're working with, is that intelligence and allowing it to communicate at 100%. That's what taking you out of the stress response does, is it allows you to heal yourself. It allows you to connect. It allows you to control your heart, to control your emotions, to control your body. It allows you to control everything. But if you get stuck there, then what happens is you start breaking down. And as you break down, then problems show up. And in our culture, we call them diseases. In chiropractic, there's a continuum of how healthy or sick you are. And how it works is you have health here, and you have death here. And right here you have ease. That's going to lead to health. And then you have dis-ease, which means a lack of ease. Then you have disease, and then you have death. So my goal is to put you in a state of ease so that your body will communicate that intelligence to you and back to the brain, so it works back and forth, connects correctly, and then you heal. The disconnection in communication leads to cells acting on their own, and that's how you get sick.
Say that again?
So I usually don't go this far into it, but I'll go into it. So the innate intelligence I usually say is just in the brain, but actually the innate intelligence is everywhere in the body.
Every cell?
Every cell has it. The problem is, if that cell is doing what's best for it and not what's best for the whole, then it's called cancer. Yeah, because that cell now says, I want sugar, I want air, and I'm not going to be a kidney cell anymore. I want everything. That's called cancer. I want to grow as fast as I want to grow. I want to do whatever I want to do. And what happens is, it's not what's best for the whole, so that's why it's called cancer.
So it's no longer controlled by the genetics? Or the
Genetics,
DNA.
the communication, anything. It's doing what it wants to do. It's controlled by its own wants and needs. And that's why it becomes carcinogenic into the point where it will mutate and it will start sending out blood vessels to get more oxygen, more blood, more energy, so that it can grow faster. So it becomes its own entity. So the simplistic way of explaining this, cancer is the same thing as a kid who just ate 15 pounds of lollipops and wants to do whatever he wants to do and run around the house and destroy everything. Because it's all happy and high on whatever it wants to do. It's a cell that is doing what it wants to do, not what it's supposed to do. Our goal is to make sure the body communicates correctly, and then what it does is the body will send the mama cell or the daddy cell or the Rambo cell, whatever you want to call it, and that cell goes in there and says, stop doing this if it doesn't do it. And I'm making this a story, but literally what it does is it goes in and eats it. It's called the macrophage. And it goes in and says, you're not listening to the brain, bye. And here's the thing, most people aren't aware that every day you produce 16 to 18,000 cancer cells. It's not cancer, it's just that's what you produce because those cells aren't listening. So you have cells that go out and destroy them. But if your brain can't communicate correctly and that cell body grows big enough, like literally to get seen as a tumor, it's like 1 million cells.
Okay, so what cell what'd you call it that actually goes out and kills?
They're macrophages. Macrophages.
Phages?
Yeah. So they go out and eat.
Macrophages.
Yeah, phages. So they're a form of a white blood cell, which is a lymphocyte. So what I'm trying to show you here is, yes, your heart is controlled by your nerve system if you're healthy. If you're not, it'll start being controlled by your hormones and your emotions. And this is what we're seeing. That machine I have called the Alpha will actually show you how much of your heart is driven on emotions, neurological, how much is driven on adaptability. It'll show you how healthy your heart is. And when I look at the test, this is the real cool part of the test. It'll actually tell you how adaptable you are based on the heart wave. So that's a heart wave, and then between it, it goes doom. Sometimes there's a little bump right there at the end too. So it goes OPQRST wave. And that's what it's called, the OPQRST wave. That's the heart wave. And it's based on, each part of the little bump is based on a part of the heart firing. Like the atrium, the ventricles, and then the different SA node, AV node, all those things produce a different part of the heart wave. Because what the heart wave really is an electromagnetic field that we're reading. And so each part produces a different rhythm in that field. And so we look at the heart wave and it goes boom, 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 boom. Keeps doing that. Well, between here tells me how much emotional and chemical change you have going on. In here, on the heart wave, it tells me how strong your heart is. Can your heart beat correctly? Can it change correctly? Because we'll see some people that have little heart waves and other ones that have huge productive heart waves. And it literally tells me how adaptable you are based on how big that heart wave is and how rhythmic it is. Does it look like it's the same heartbeat wave, or does it change all the time? Is it completely erratic? How does it look? This is what is read and transferred into this, which is called heart rate variability. So we literally read this for 300 beats on one of the tests that I do, and it shows me how you do. On the other test, which is the SRE, or stress response evaluation, we read the heart rate, relate it to the respiration rate, then relate it to all the stress that you're going through, and it tells me how adaptable you are. And that's why I get this one. So these both are indications of how adaptable you are to stress. This OPQRST wave is really cool, but the information that we really want to know is your emotional stress and your chemical stress, aka are your hormones running your body? How much vitality do you have? And you can tell, so if I have a person come in here and they're very lethargic, and like tired, I can do this test and it'll be very, very low. And then if it takes them a month or a couple weeks, all of a sudden they get their vitality back, you will literally watch the heart rate variability go up. Because I watched mine go from 100, I had a perfect heart rate variability, all the way down to 60 because I was under a ton of stress. And then I bounced back up to 100 again in 3 weeks. But it gives you, if you have a good heart rate variability where it looks like this, it gives you a reserve of energy that you have now. Because now your heart can adapt correctly to your environment. If it can't adapt correctly, that's when we get a heart attack. Because if we're already running on the base frequency and we have no reserve, if we speed it up at all, it just falls apart. That's what a heart attack is. So our goal is to give you such a reserve of adaptability, which is energy that can be turned into anything, that now you can deal with things, and that energy that was being used to fight or run away is now being used to heal, and then it can still be taken back and go into fight and run away, but then go back into healing. That's adaptability. The problem with our culture in North America is we're stuck in fight, 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 fight all the time. We don't adapt, and we break ourselves down. And that's where these chronic disease processes come from. So the goal for me is to make you so adaptable that now you can deal with reality and work and health and vitality and just become a healthy person. Because you can change. If you don't change, that's when you get sick and that's when you die.
Yeah.
The inability to change is what indicates somebody who's sick. And the Japanese talk about this, or the Chinese, being that willow, and you can move and everything's okay, the tree that's really static and hard is going to break. The same thing is with your body. You have to be able to adapt to any emotional, physical, or chemical stress, and then you're okay. You can deal with it. But if you become rigid, that's when you break. And that's when disease happens, and that's when problems happen. And you can actually see this in people. The sicker they are, the more rigid they are. The healthier they are, the more limber they are. Because your nerve system is literally how healthy you are. And your musculoskeletal system, or how tight your muscles are, is a direct reflection of how stressed out your nerve system is. So the tighter you are, and the more stuck in a position you are, and you can't move, the less limber you are, the higher stress you are, and the sicker you are. The more relaxed you are, the more limber you are. And that's why we see people, as they start getting adjusted and their brain changes, and then we start training it, then we start seeing them become more limber, more adaptable, more energy, more vitality. All these things happen because now their nerve system is adaptable. Whereas before the nerve system wasn't, so what's the byproduct of an unhealthy nerve system? A rigid body. So that's what we're looking for.
Okay, so the distance between those two pulses tells you,
Well, we're actually looking not at the distance, but the fluctuation. So there'll be waves that move around in here. And that will let me know, is it emotional driven, hormonal? So the peak tells me how powerful it is. And then when you go in here, this intersection here, and I'll tell you the truth, I don't know exactly everything about it. I just know what my machinery will tell me. And when we measure this in here, there's an algorithm that these scientists made up that actually shows which thing is driving what, and based on your heart rate, what's it going to be driving, and they make inferences from it. So they go, okay, so we see your heart rate go like this, but we see a little wave here, that means it's emotional. We see a little thing here, that means it's chemical. We see a little thing here, that tells me it's energy. So we can see when it pumps really big, I know you have a lot of energy. But it can fluctuate, it can go down where your heart isn't as strong because now you don't have the same energy or resources to make it keep pumping. Because you think about it, that heart rate is beating all the time. 60 beats a minute. Dunk, 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 dunk. All the time. Where's that energy coming from? It has to continually be fed there. And it's actually, it's a white muscle, which means it's fed by the energy in your body. So the sugar in your body is going through, and it actually uses that to make the heart work. Does that make sense?
okay,
So our goal is to make it adaptable so it changes. And one of the things is, how big or small this is tells me how much energy you have in your body. So the more energy you have, the bigger the wave will be.
so the healthier you are, the bigger that pulse will be, the heartbeat will be stronger.
Yeah, it'll be a good one. But there's counterintuitive things to it too. Say you have starting to get, because there's a certain part and then it gets worse. So if you have too big of a heart wave, too big of a contraction, and you have too much muscular formation, which is called hypertrophy in the heart, then what will happen is the heart vessel wall will actually get bigger. The actual valve or the amount of blood that can be pushed is smaller, and then the heart has to push harder and faster to get more blood out because your heart's gotten too big. So there's multiple factors. Or how much external tension is there on the body? So if you're stressed, what will happen is you'll get what's called vasoconstriction. The blood vessels will get small, and then the heart beats faster and harder to push it out and shoot it out quicker. So I'm giving you a simple answer to a multidimensional thing.
Okay.
So the simple thing is, yes, if everything is static and the person hasn't changed, and you don't have cholesterol issues, and you don't have a hardening of the walls, and you don't have vascular issues, and your communication is correctly, and the heart is okay, then yes, a bigger heartbeat is good.
So you could say simply, if it's a healthy heartbeat,
Yes.
then a big one is good.
Yeah, but if we have cholesterol issues, we have sclerosis, hardening of the arteries, then it won't move correctly, and then the heart rate's going to go up. You have multiple things that add into it, so I can't just say A equals B. It's this can equal all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
Which one's driving it? That's why it's hard for people to say, well, if you have high cholesterol, take this medication and you're going to get better. And I'm like, well, why do you have the high cholesterol? The cholesterol is a symptom of something. And it's a symptom of you not adapting correctly. As you adapt correctly, what will happen is your cholesterol will come down. Because cholesterol is a direct reflection of how stressed you are. What happens is, when you're stressed, your body will produce a lot of cholesterol and push it out because it's being used as a healing agent. Cholesterol is a sticky substance that will latch onto cells, and if they have cuts and things in them, it'll latch onto it to heal it. But it's only produced when you're stressed at high levels. There's no such thing as good and bad cholesterol. That's a myth. there's 4 kinds of cholesterol. One is pushed out and one is pulled in. The assumption is that if you have too much cholesterol being pushed out, you're sick. Because what they found is that people who had heart attacks had a higher incidence of cholesterol. But there's actually no correlation. If you go back to every article they've actually referenced, the 2 leading articles just said these people had high cholesterols and they also had heart attacks. And that's what the basis of all the cholesterol myth is based on. If you want to look into this, there's a Dr. Udo Erasmus out of Norway who did a whole book on this, and he's a medical doctor. He talks about the cholesterol myth. If you're stressed out, your LDL and your VLDL, which is the bad, goes out to heal you. To make sure if you get cut, that your cut heals correctly. To make sure if you get damaged, that your cells get healed correctly. The HDL and the there's one other higher one, I think it's like VHDL, or not V, or whatever, so there's one other one, is the cholesterol that is being brought back to your liver. But it's cycling. It's like saying cars that go that way are good, but cars that go that way are bad. It doesn't make any sense. I'm like, no, it's moving a substance that is healing for the body throughout. But what happens is, if it's moved out for a long enough time frame, and the body's always in stress, it will start dumping off that cholesterol at places because it just has too much. And then if it gets dumped off, it can get stuck on a wall. If it gets stuck on a wall long enough, it can lead to a thrombus or an emboli or a hardening of the arteries. But that's all happening because you're stressed. So an example of one way people try to help themselves is they go on vegetarian diets. That takes the chemical stress out of their life. It doesn't mean their cholesterol is going to go down unless the chemical stress was the thing driving their high cholesterol. If their emotional stress was doing it, it might drop a little, but it's not going to change much. If their physical stress is the one driving it, it might drop a little, but it's not going to change much. So we're going back to how adaptable are we? How well is our heart adapting to the stress we're in? How well is our body adapting to it? And when we adapt correctly, then we have energy to heal. When we don't adapt correctly, we are stuck in stress, and now we don't heal, we fight. And when we fight, we build up toxins and we get sick. On every form. Emotionally, physically, chemically, every form gets sick. Any other questions, guys? We're good? Excellent. So think of somebody you would love to change their life and bring them. Just bring them next time. And let them ask me any question they want. And I'll answer to my best knowledge, and if I don't have the answer, I'll find it for them.
Good enough. Thank you.